Good afternoon. I am Andrea Chisholm with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. The sentencing hearing for the 5 individuals who were convicted of defrauding the Manchester Municipal Corporation of $400 million is underway. Norman Godfrey, the attorney representing Sandra Elliott during his plea mitigation this morning, urged the court to consider a fine for some of the charges. Mr. Godfrey argued that his client's conviction has done irreparable damage to his character and he should not have to suffer further through a custodial sentence. Mr. Godfrey also made a similar request for Mr. Elliott's wife, Tasha Gay. Mr. Elliott, a former deputy superintendent in charge of road and works, his wife Tasha Gay, acting chief executive officer David Harris, temporary works overseer Kendale Roberts, and construction worker Dwayne Sibbles were found guilty on May 15. 3 of the convicts were employees of the Manchester Parish Council, and that's the Manchester Municipal Corporation. The opposition spokesman on health believes the government should put a hold on the contract renewal process for Jamaica Moves pending a detailed investigation into the arrangements with communications company Market Me. Dr. Maurice Guy is also raising more questions about ownership of the Jamaica Moves brand.
Jamaica Moves, a campaign by the Health Ministry to combat obesity and other lifestyle illnesses. News, however, surfaced last week that communication firm Market Me owns the brand. In a release on Sunday, Market Me said its contracts with the Health Ministry have expired and renewal negotiations will involve outstanding matters, including the ownership and rights to intellectual property. Opposition spokesman on health Dr. Maurice Guy gave his reaction.
Market Me indicated that they conceptualize and pursue Jamaica Moves. That goes against the scope of work in terms of the terms of reference that was prepared by the Ministry of Health and Wellness in 2016 when they engaged Market Me Jamaican at number 4 under the scope of work. It said develop and implement a national physical activity campaign. We need clarification from the Ministry of Health and Wellness in light of this new development. First of all, why was not the terms of the contract obeyed faithfully? Secondly, why is it now that we are hearing that Market Me Jamaica is demanding that in any settlement, the concept of intellectual property right ownership is going to be part of the negotiation?
Dr. Guy adds that the Health Ministry should halt the contract renewal process for Jamaica Moves pending an investigation.
Our view is that a full investigation ought to be undertaken before any further contracting of the parties should be engaged.
Public commentator Clive Monroe Jr. called for an assessment to determine the extent to which Jamaica Moves achieved its objective.
On its face, it appeared to have done great things, certainly within the middle class and upper demographics. When you see these 5Ks and so on and so forth, and the marketing in that respect was very good. As to how wide it was, I believe there's a question there for scrutiny. And I'm actually a little bit saddened that much of this discussion has kind of descended into conjecture instead of being focused on a scrutiny of whether or not we got value for money and the governance issues, which are the real core issues and not the other extraneous material.
Government contracts to Market Me are now under scrutiny, and the company has vowed to pursue all legal options to protect its brand. Market Me got 2 contracts with the Health Ministry totaling roughly $55 million. The contracts were awarded using the direct contracting method, and there are questions about whether they were influenced by a personal relationship between Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton and a principal of the marketing firm.
In more court-related news, the Supreme Court is now hearing the applications for the release of 5 men detained under the state of emergency. Today's hearing follows reports last week that the men were being freed following the judge's ruling on the unconstitutionality of their detention. However, the Court Administration Division later indicated that this was not correct. Dion Jackson Miller has details.
Well, at the start of today's proceedings, there was a brief exchange over whether there should be a hearing of the matter today. Justice Bertram Morrison agreed with the government lawyers that the order that was made last week was for the men to be brought to court today for an examination and a decision whether the men have been lawfully detained. Now, their cases are being heard one by one. The detention of Everton Douglas was dealt with first. He's been in custody since January 26th. Now, the judge asked why it was that Mr. Douglas had not been charged and brought before a court. The policeman responding, one of the police witnesses, said Mr. Douglas was regarded as a leader of the Jakes Road gang who had been committing serious crimes in the community. He said he regarded him as dangerous. Now, Detective Inspector Simpson was one of the police witnesses, said he regarded Mr. Douglas as a leader of the Jakes Road gang who had been committing serious crimes in the community. He said he regarded him as dangerous, but the police had no evidence that could result in him being charged, as witnesses are often reluctant to come forward in such cases. Another police witness today was Superintendent Victor Hamilton. The judge asked him if it wasn't true that at the end of the detention period, the detainees have to be released into the community. What, therefore, is being achieved by these detentions, he asked. Superintendent Hamilton responded that the imposition of the state of emergency has led to a dramatic reduction in crime in the Kingston East Division and reduction in level of fear in the community. Now, the other detainees are to be brought before the court, as I said, one by one. Evidence will be taken, cross-examination, and the evidence of the detainees is to be dealt with.
Dion Jackson Miller there, ending that report from the Supreme Court. The Kingston West Police Division has recorded the biggest increase in murders so far this year. The area is now under a state of a public emergency. Crime statistics from January 1 to July 25 show that murders in the police division are up 54%, with 57 persons being killed this year when compared to 37 during the same period last year. Overall, though, murders are down by 2.5% across the country. 768 murders were reported last year and 749 this year. Shootings are down 11%, rape down by 16%, robberies down 12%, and break-ins down by roughly 23%. And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. We have much more stories when we return. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. Investigators assigned to the Portland Police Division are probing the killing of a man in Buff Bay over the weekend. Dead is 24-year-old Shade Morrison of a West Kingston address. Reports are that around 6:30 Saturday, Morrison and another man were sitting at a gate along Nelson Street when they were pounced upon by gunmen who opened fire, hitting them several times. They were taken to hospital where Morrison was pronounced dead and the other man injured. Some residents in the area are now fearful.
Right now, I'm really fearful in my life in a place. I live down in a lane, I'm really fearful. Because I get to understand, so my neighbor, the lady that one good lady in a lane, and she almost get shot. She sweep up her yard. I just feel like something chip on her neck. You see me, I say, so she really fearful, and me fearful. My kids them down there, I have 5 kids down there I take care down in the lane. So I'm really fearful. You see it?
The resident said the incident has painted a negative image of the community.
Buff Bay, I want a little peaceful town, so I grew up here, so I want peaceful town. Even when politics are going, everybody greet them, one that hug up them, one that in one bar a drink and something. So I want peaceful town. So that this is a much of the town, really. Honestly, this is a much of the town. Definitely much of the town.
The body of a fisherman was found washed up at a facility in Ocheria, St. Anne yesterday. It was identified as that of 68-year-old David Johnson of Arokabessa, St. Mary. Reports are that about 1 p.m., the police were called to a business place where Mr. Johnson's body was found. Items believed to be swimming gear were seen near his body. The police are investigating. A United States Coast Guard team seized nearly 4,000 pounds of marijuana during an operation in the Caribbean Sea valued at nearly $7 million. The U.S. Southern Command says one of its ships was on routine patrol on Friday when the team spotted a go-fast vessel. Suspected drug smugglers aboard the vessel were seen throwing packages overboard. The U.S. patrol team recovered 708 bales of marijuana. With concerns about insufficient resources for the Jamaica Fire Brigade, they are poised to receive 30 pumpers costing $3 billion. Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie made the disclosure during his contribution to the sectoral debate.
We committed to provide 2 command vehicles, Mr. Speaker. Instead of giving 2, we gave them 5, Mr. Speaker. 5. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, we have spent $3 billion in providing 30 pumpers to the Jamaica Fire Brigade. Never before has so much investment been made, Mr. Speaker. As a result, Mr. Speaker, 16 brand new pumpers are expected in the island in March next year, and the remaining 15 will come in May.
Fire stations in Black River, St. Elizabeth and Lucy Hanover will also be refurbished at a cost of $39.5 million. A temporary facility will be built to house firefighters in Old Harbour, St. Catherine, as the current building is unacceptable.
Medical services will be launched in Ocho Rios in St. Anne's Bay. We will provide bunker gears, jaws of life cutting tools, and other equipment at a cost of $248 million to the Jamaica Fire Brigade, Mr. Speaker.
A motor vehicle accident claimed the life of a man on the Prospect Main Road in Manchester yesterday. 2 other persons were injured. The dead man has been identified as 24-year-old Marcus Brooks, a mechanic from Prospect District. Our news team understands that about 12:15 a.m., Mr. Brooks was driving a Toyota motor vehicle with 2 passengers when he lost control upon reaching a section of the road. All 3 men sustained multiple injuries and were taken to hospital, where Mr. Brooks was pronounced dead. Meanwhile, a man is dead and another injured following a motorcycle accident along the Whithorn Main Road over the weekend. The dead man has been identified as Okivev Samuels of Whithorn District. It's understood that the driver of the bike attempted to overtake a car when he lost control, fell and slid under a truck.
When we was coming up, I saw a van park on the right hand side. A van park on the right hand side in the corner. There is a bike coming up from the opposite direction, swerve away from the bike, swerve away from the van that parked in the corner, fell to the ground and slide right underneath the truck. So when we came out of the truck, the bike was so crushed, and we walked down the road, we see 2 men lay down on the ground.
The men were taken to hospital, where Mr. Samuels was pronounced dead and the other admitted in stable condition. Several communities in St. Catherine will have their water supply disrupted following the closure of the Sioux River water facility. The National Water Commission, NWC, says the closure is due to mechanical problems. It's not clear when normal operations will resume. In a release today, the NWC said its maintenance teams are assessing the damage. Affected communities include Freetown, Sioux River, Mizpah, St. Faith's, Cassava River, Glengoff, Goff, and Big Roads. In news from the region, Barbados today began 3 days of national mourning following the death of a former Prime Minister, Owen Arthur. He died this morning at the age of 70. Mr. Arthur, an economist, had been hospitalized earlier this month at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital after suffering heart-related complications. He was the 5th Prime Minister of Barbados and the longest-serving head of government. And Prime Minister Andrew Holness said Mr. Arthur served Barbados and the Caribbean with distinction. Mr. Holness said the former Prime Minister was passionate about his country and the dream of regional integration. He said in the 1990s and early 2000s, Mr. Arthur helped to shape the political scene in the region. And opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips has also reacted to news of Mr. Arthur's death. Dr. Phillips said Mr. Arthur made an important and fundamental contribution to regionalism, having been the Prime Minister who led the push for a single market and economy in CARICOM. And in sports, heavy rain abandoned Day 4 action between the West Indies and England at Old Trafford in Manchester. The Caribbean side ended Day 3 wobbling on 10-2 as the English need another 8 wickets to win and reclaim the Wisden Trophy. Craig Brathwaite and Shea Hope are the batsmen at the crease on 2 and 4 respectively. Jamaican John Campbell and Bajan Kamar Roach were the wickets to fall at the end of the Day 3, and they departed for a duck and 4 respectively. And that's the Midday News. I'm Andrea Chisholm. Join us at 7 for the Primetime News Package. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.